Welcome to Just Energy Radio with your host, naturopath and medical intuitive, Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theory that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating. From the swinging of a pendulum to the waves of the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day, each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is when we take everything in our universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita Louise on a journey through time and space where past, present, and future collide. Today, what you believe may be called into question. What we want to know is, who made up the rules? Be brave and step outside the box. We are about to turn our world upside down and venture into the unknown. Hold on. We are departing our own beliefs and entering alternative realms. Enjoy the possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show today. We are going to be speaking to a very good friend of mine, John Michael Greer. The last time he was on the show was Mayan Fool's Day, almost 3 years ago, which kind of blew my mind when I put those two pieces together. And we're going to be talking about a couple of his new books, but primarily about the occult and delving deeply into that topic. Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com, as well as the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's appliedenergeticsinstitute.com, where you can jumpstart your intuition today by downloading their free 50-page guide. Now, we all know Christmas is right around the corner, or the holiday season is right around the corner, and if you want to get a great stocking stuffer for a friend or family member, don't forget, you can get a copy of Icon, Deconstructing the Archetypes of the Ancients DVD off of the soulhealer.com website. It's still available at $1.99 on Amazon.com, but if you want something very cool, I think that would be a great gift. Anyway, let me tell you a little bit about John and get him on the air. John Michael Greer has been a student of the occult traditions and the unexplained for more than 30 years. A Freemason, a student of geomancy and sacred geometry, and a widely read blogger, he is also the author of numerous books, including Monsters, the new Encyclopedia of the Occult, and Secrets of the Lost Symbol, and currently serves as the Grand Archdruid of the Ancient Order of Druids in America, a contemporary school of Druid nature spirituality. Greer has contributed articles to Renaissance Magazine, Golden Dawn Journal, New Moon Rising, Gnostics, and Alexandria. Webpage, the archdruidreport.blogspot.com. That's a bit of a mouthful. Please welcome John Michael Greer. Hey, John.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be back on.
It has been entirely too long. Entirely.
Well, hey, now we fixed that.
We have. Well, and you just seem like in these last 3 years that you've been kind of prolific, releasing several books.
I've had a number of projects come out. Yes, it's been a lively time.
But that's good. I am very happy for you.
Oh, it's been a lot of work, but a number of the projects that I've been engaged in have, I think, been fairly important ones, and some of them have just been plain fun. So it's been a good balance of entertainment and value, I think.
Well, I have a copy of your new Encyclopedia of the Occult, which isn't a brand new book, but fairly new. And I have to tell you, I am awed and impressed with your book.
I've been told by several people that it is the best bathroom reading in modern occult literature.
Well, that's actually a pretty good idea. Because it's not a sit down and read kind of book, but I was flipping pages and going, oh, well, that's really interesting. And, looking, kind of flipping through, going, oh, well, that's really interesting. I mean, people that are listening, just to give you an idea, this book is probably about 3 inches thick. And if you are thinking about something magical, metaphysical, Kabbalistic, alchemy, runes, tarot, I'm not even quite sure what else, which we'll find out. It is in this book. I mean, it's...
I did my best.
I was looking, you didn't have kitchen sink in there. I did check.
That's something I should fix in the next in the revised edition. Well, a lot of what motivates, actually a fair number of my book projects, I think, okay, what would I have wanted to have when I was first getting started in this stuff? What are the books that I wish I had had? I'd been able to go down to the store, pick up out of my bookshelf, have right there, so that when I needed something, I could just reach up to the shelf. And the new Encyclopedia of the Occult was well up on that list. I wanted a good single-volume reference work where if I was trying to figure, I run across a reference to the Kabbalah, I run across a reference to some astrological concept or to this part of alchemy or all kinds of stuff like that. The whole range of magical personalities. Okay, somebody references John Dee. Okay, now that's a fairly well-known name, but not everyone knows about John Dee. For those that don't, he was Queen Elizabeth I of England back in what we still call the Elizabethan period. He was her court astrologer and wizard. An amazing guy. But so I wished that there had been a reference book like that, but since no one else had gotten around to writing one, it was kind of on me. So I spent about 3 years in that. Mostly it was just 3 years of reading. And it was a fun project. The encyclopedias are easy. You don't have to develop an argument. You don't have to. I mean, nonfiction. People think nonfiction books don't have a plot. They're wrong. They're just like novels. You've got to lead the reader step by step along the way, from page one to the final thing. An encyclopedia, you don't have to do that. You just here's just the facts, man.
Well, and it is really comprehensive. I thought it would be, just before I received it, not very big, one, and fairly limited to what I would consider, in my mind, occult stuff, looking at secret societies and that kind of things. But it really, it gets into mythology, it gets into symbolism. I think there was a section on the I Ching. It was like, wow, this everything.
Well, basically, I think a lot of people don't realize just how much is in the occult traditions, just how this thing we call the occult, how much stuff that suitcase will hold. And seriously, everything from Atlantis to Zosimus of Panophilis. There are people, there are places, there are teachings, there are symbols. All of this stuff ties into occultism to one degree or another. And if you're studying occultism, or even if you're just curious about it, sooner or later you're going to go, now, who is that guy? Or what's an alembic? Okay, somebody just referenced an alembic. What's an alembic? It's a piece of glassware that alchemists use, by the way.
Yeah, stuff like that, which makes it, like you said, a great bathroom read, because you can just kind of pick it up and go to your next page and get new information of things that you would never even think there was a word for or that existed.
Yeah, Zorvoyance. I loved it. Zorvoyance. Yes, there was a 19th century American occultist who divided clairvoyance, as we normally call it, this ability to see the normally unseen, into two sort of subsets of ethovoyance and zorvoyance. And ethovoyance is seeing on the spiritual plane, and zorvoyance is seeing on the astral plane. If you read certain old occult texts, you're going to run across reference to zorvoyance. It just sounds so great. But you'd be lost. How do you know to look up in P.B. Randolph's books on magic? Very few people read him anymore. And so you turn to the Encyclopedia. Oh, Zorvoyance. There we go. I just love the sound of the name. Also, it sounds like Zoltan, the master, practicing Zorvoyance. It would make great bad fantasy.
And that was one of the things that I really liked about it. It does take a number of, I'm going to say, arcane words that are not in common circulation now, even if you are involved in some kind of spiritual tradition. I mean, they don't happen. For example, one of the things that I saw in there, which I was like, I never knew that, was that it looked like there were 3 or 4 different systems of runes.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe more. I don't know. I saw like 3.
There are 4 main ones. For all I know, there may be others, but there are 4 main ones. There's the Elder Futhark, which is the set that most people know about, the 24 runes. There's the Younger Futhark, which is just 16, and that was the one that was actually used by the Vikings. The Elder Futhark was older than that. There was the Anglo-Saxon Futhark, which is, I think, 32 different letters. And then there's a thing called the Armanen runes, which you mostly encounter in Germany and Central Europe these days. And so, yeah, there are these 4 different rune systems, and although most people in America just know about the Elder Futhark, that was the one that Ralph Blum popularized in the Book of Runes. It's the ones most rune decks use, and so on. Here and there, you'll find people doing these other things. You'll find books teaching these other systems. And my immediate thought was, hey, let's make sure people have the opportunity to choose. Besides, you might run across a reference to one of the Armanen runes somewhere, and then you'd be really up, the legendary river without a paddle if you have no idea what an Armanen rune is.
Or even know that there's a difference. I had no idea that there were 4 different sets.
Yeah.
And not about runes, but even about 4 different alphabets that were used.
Yeah. And so, there are things that, I will probably end up going back and revising and expanding that sometime in the next several years, because, even now looking back the short time since that's been published, I'm going, I should have put something about this guy. I should have put something about this teaching. What about, I really didn't mention the Theban alphabet, and I should have talked about the Theban alphabet, that kind of thing. But as it is, it will definitely give you a good basic run-through of most of the things you'll run into, and most of the people, most of the concepts, symbols, runes, poem letters, all kinds of stuff.
Okay, so we talked about symbols, we talked about runes, we talked about zoology. Maybe I need to think about like the Mask of Zorro, Zorrovoyance.
Yes, think of Zorro, gazing into the mysterious distance, and you have Zorrovoyance. It's just if you'll excuse the pun, it conjures up images of strange robes and the sort of colorful 1920s Art Deco approach to occultism.
Yes,
we really need more of that. I mean, the occult traditions in America have really gotten rather hidebound. You get certain very narrow samples from the immensely broader range of occultism that's out there, and beyond that, people don't even know that it's possible. And in particular, up until very recently, an enormous number of people in this country thought that all magic was invented in England sometime between when the Golden Dawn was founded and whenever Gerald Gardner finished writing the first Book of Shadows. It's either got to be the Golden Dawn, or it's got to be Aleister Crowley, it's got to be Dion Fortune, it's got to be one of the early Wiccans, or they don't even know that it can be done. And there's a lot more stuff out there. There's all kinds of cool things out there.
Is it America? Is it more global? Is it a not mass production, but popularization of these texts? Facebook and bookstores keeping it on their shelves and not other ones.
Well, the thing is, it was going before Facebook. It was the problem is, first of all, of course, most Americans are completely terrified at the thought of learning a second language. And I found this here. I'm going to give all of our listeners a secret. If you want to have a career writing books on magic, learn a second language. It is that simple. Learn a second language. You read things that are not written in English, and nobody you know will ever have heard about all the stuff you're now studying. I read French. I read Latin. Those are the two languages I have so far. I'm working on German, and there's some really cool stuff in German I haven't had a chance to read yet. These things have never been translated. Nobody knows you can do them. Nobody knows they exist. There's just truckloads of really interesting magic written in other languages. And so Americans, because Americans are terrified of learning a second language, if it didn't happen in the English-speaking world, nobody knows that it exists. And I think one of the things about the sort of popularization of occultism in recent decades is that it's very easy for something that's become a sort of pop culture movement to get into a rut. To go, the more popular it is, the more it sort of circles around the same thing over and over again. And I really think, to some extent, our magical traditions have gotten into that. We need to shake ourselves awake and look around at all the other neat stuff that's out there. Like Zorvoyance.
Well, with magic and stuff like that becoming more popular, do you find that it's becoming also more diluted?
Yes.
Not delusional, but diluted.
No. Although there's always a little of that. I forget what was the name of the TV show that was a while back. I think the name was Charmed or something like that. And shortly after it came out, I've never seen it, but all of the occult groups that I knew of suddenly started getting bombarded by with emails and letters and so on by teenage girls who desperately wanted a spell to make their hair turn blonde because they'd seen that in this TV show.
I believe it.
This girl had put a whammy on her hair, and her hair had turned from brown to blonde. Ooh, so everybody wanted it. The number of people who have been trying to get trained in Harry Potter magic since the Harry Potter books first, hit the big time, and we have to sit them down and tell them, no, it doesn't work that way. You can't just wave a wand and speak some words of bad Latin and have miracles come pouring out. Oh well, but to circle back to the point you were making, which is a totally valid one, yes, there's a tendency for it to become diluted. There's a tendency for things to seek the lowest common denominator, to minimize move away from things that actually require serious work, which means moving away from things that actually have serious results. And so it tends to get really watered down. And
I noticed that I was a very serious student of Kabbalah years ago, and I got to, if I could only read another language, but I'm a language retard. I can barely read English. Just ask any of my listeners, and much less even try another language. So I've just given up on that one. And I remember finding these books that, there was meat, there was substance to them. And then now it's like, not so much. It's really, everybody's writing to beginners. And it's like, I want something hard.
No, here's the funny thing. When I go to events in the pagan magical community, where I'm there as a writer, there are other people there as writers, and every single time somebody gets up and says, "Why don't you write? Why aren't there more books for serious practitioners? Okay, why aren't there more advanced books out there?" Now, here's the funny thing: I've written some very advanced books. They don't sell. They really don't sell. Nobody buys them. The books of mine that sell are the beginner's books. The single bestseller of any of my books is Monsters. You can guess what it's about. It's very much for it's a fun book, and it's, I think, in some ways a useful book, but it's not exactly high-powered upper-end magical practice. And everybody else I know who's written books for the serious practitioner has had exactly the same thing happen. There are people who want those books. There aren't that many of them. And so publishers who are, in the business to stay in business, they publish what people buy, and what people buy is mostly beginner books.
Isn't that sad?
Yeah, yes.
And I just find myself going to, find old books, because back then those were the books that were published.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Well, again, and I think this has to do with the influence of pop culture. Because, when something becomes popular, it's going to be brought down to the lowest common denominator. It's going to be circulated in forms that spread the most easily. Back in the day, I'm thinking back to when I first started my magical training in the mid-1970s, as a teenager underfoot in the occult scene. There were like 4 tarot decks available for sale in North America. Seriously, you did not get. These days there are how many thousands? But there were like 4. You could get the Rider-Waite, you could get the Marseille, and let's see, there was the Swiss IJJ, and then there was this really ugly deck that had been put together originally for a James Bond movie, and for some reason it became popular for a while. And those were the 4 you could get. I remember when David Palladini's Aquarian Tarot and the Morgan Greer Tarot became available. Everyone was going, whoa, look at this new tarot decks. Who'd have thunk? Or the rejoicing that went up when somebody finally reprinted a good color edition of Aleister Crowley's Thoth deck. You didn't get things like that very often. And in the same way, the books, most of the serious occult books at that time, there were a couple of publishers that produced, small runs of the very heavy, serious books. Mostly it was mimeographed stuff, spiral, with spiral plastic bindings and things. You order it by mail from places like Marlar and Tyrad. These basically hoodoo shops that were selling Anna Rivas, mystic oils and candle kits and black feathers to trim into quills, mostly sold to the hoodoo trade, to the folk magic trade, but also carried anything else magical they could get. And I think because it was so much of a smaller market, and because so many of the people who were in it were serious, because it wasn't popular, it wasn't faddish. If you had the gumption to get into it at all, you were probably going to go on to the advanced levels, and so you could get things like that. These days, you pretty much have to go to the older books.
Which doesn't really hurt my feelings, but
still, as long as the older books are kept available, and that's one of those things.
Well, one of the things that I find is a blessing is, there's a lot of groups that are digitizing a lot of the older books that I have found online or, on Amazon in a digitized format. So.
Oh, yeah, I know, and it's
not
really,
the same, but at least
it's really nice that happens. But oh man, I like books. I like the physical object. I know that makes me horribly old-fashioned or something like that, but
no,
I really do
I go to these like old bookstores that have like the old used books, and I'm always like looking for something like a little gem to take home, and I never find anything.
Oh, good heavens! You don't go to the right used bookstores then?
Apparently
not. I've been. I tend to have better luck than that. I go to big, sprawling used bookstores that don't, the sort of thing that's basically a gigantic warehouse, and they don't rotate their stock. If it doesn't sell, it just sits there on the shelf. You can find the most amazing things sometimes.
Well, okay.
Okay, yeah. You need to look for the right used bookstore. Do a divination. Where do I find the right used bookstore? And the pendulum starts pointing you in that direction. You just go. Or you can use Zorvoyance to guide you there.
Well, I think that's going to work better for me because pendulums don't work for me.
Okay, yeah.
So,
okay.
But I have, but now I live in Podunk, East Texas, so I think I'm going to do better, going online and just dealing with my ebooks.
Yeah, very, very likely. Yeah. Admittedly, I don't know much about East Texas bookstores.
There aren't any.
Oh dear.
and to have a book like that on the shelves, they're lucky that they have chakras here. Maybe.
Yeah, I suppose you're a little too close to the buckle on the Bible Belt. It
is the buckle. No.
Gotcha. No, the only place in Texas I've actually ever been to was Austin, and there's some quite decent bookstores there.
Yeah, Dallas not so much, and where I'm at now. No. No. We don't even have a Target. Come on.
You are in the midst of the wilderness, aren't you?
We have a Walmart. Ooh, and a
Ooh.
Kroger. That's like our big claim to fame. We have Kroger. What did you find the most interesting in your digging around through all of this material and collecting all of this material? What fascinated you, or what caught you off guard that you were surprised about the information that you uncovered?
That would be a hard call because it happens so often. I'd be reading, so I get some book from library, interlibrary loan or something like that, or something from a used bookstore, and start digging in, and they go, wow, I didn't know that. I mean, when I started, I had no idea there were 4 systems of runes either. And partly just the sheer scale of the occult traditions, how far they reached, how old they went, how you can trace things surprisingly far back just by hopping from one teacher to another, from one book to another, and so on. So the scale was one thing. And I don't know, it would be hard to point to any one specific detail as being more wow than any other. There was so much going on, so many major cultural figures who you don't think of as involved in occultism, who turned out to be in it up to their eyeballs. And connections between occult traditions and non-occult traditions that you don't think about. The number of major poets in the early 20th century, for example, who were actually either dabbling in occultism or like William Butler Yeats, who got a Nobel Prize in poetry. Lots of people know his poems. The guy was an Adeptus Major in the Golden Dawn. He was a Major League Golden Dawn adept. Yeah, and if you know what to look for, it's all through his poetry. And he wasn't the only one. He and Ezra Pound ran together for a long time, and Pound was not so serious about occultism, but he was into it. And so, these major cultural figures. Here's another example, and this was something that I found fascinating, which is that African American hoodoo practitioners, the extremely important role they played in all kinds of American magic in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It used to be, for example, that back in the day, because this is, mind you, remember, this is the era of segregation, this is the era some jobs are assigned to African American people, some aren't. Most hairdressers in a lot of the country were African American, and you didn't go to their salons, they came to your house. Okay? And most of them sold hoodoo preparations. So, your hairdresser would come to your house, and you'd get your hair done, you'd get your nails done, and then there would be, some special oil to put on to keep that cheating man of yours at home. Mm-hmm. Or there would be a candle to burn because, your son was off fighting the First World War, and you wanted to make sure he came home safe, so your hairdresser would teach you how to dress the candle and burn it every night to put a blessing on him, bring him home safe. It was huge. All over America, there were women who were learning hoodoo from their African-American their hairdressers.
But I bet they never used that word or never even thought in their mind that was what they were doing.
That was what they were doing. This was just these, these things that you do. Mm-hmm. I mean, here where I live now in the little red brick town of the north central Appalachians, you'll find at a surprising number of places people will be talking, and they're overhearing a couple of young women talking about how one of them has a boyfriend who's a complete loser and she wants to get rid of him. So the other one tells her how to make up a little baby doll and dress it in the shape of to represent the boyfriend and baptize it in his name and pack it in a box and send it to the town of Hell, Michigan. There's a town named Hell in Michigan. And you send it there and he can move out. And in fact, I heard later she did that and he moved out.
Well, I guess it worked.
It worked, yeah. And so this stuff permeated American culture, and nobody talked about it because it was the women who were doing it. The guys didn't have a clue that all this was going on. that all these women were learning spellcasting from their hairdressers.
Well, and again, I think if you ask the women, are you learning hoodoo? They'd be like, no, I'm just lighting this candle.
Yeah, just lighting this candle. This is like prayer, where it's like it's just something you do. Exactly. And so that was, I found that very charming.
But see, I think that's cool, and I'm really glad you shared that because, it's Americana, and it's also about how people can invest their time and energy into some, and I'm going to use this occult practice, and not even realize that's what they're doing.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, one of the things, one of the other things that, and it wasn't in the Encyclopedia when I first noticed this. I picked this up a long time ago. When your sort of Bible Belt Republicans get up and start talking about how America used to be this good, faithful Christian country where none of this occultist stuff, they're lying. They're either ignorant as get out or they're lying through their teeth. The United States has been full of wizards and hoodoo doctors and granny women and people casting spells since the first colonists arrived. There were people aboard the Mayflower who were practicing magic. It's documented. There have been people in practically the first thing that happened after white people started settling here, and the first thing and started bringing black people, African American people over here to do their work for them, is that people started swapping spells. And so you have the beginnings of an American magical tradition. You have, in colonial times, you have alchemists in New England. You have Pennsylvania Dutch who bring over German Rosicrucian magic and practicing it and publishing books on it. You have, of course, the slaves who are bringing their own African traditions in. You have Native American traditions. You have this bubbling cauldron of wizardry, and that's American history. And so when the Bible Belt Republican says nobody ever used to do that, as I said, they're either ignorant or they're lying. It is red, white, and blue. It is older than the United States. Benjamin Franklin was up to his eyeballs in this stuff. Good old Ben Franklin, one of the fathers of our country, member of the Hellfire Club.
Well, isn't Freemasonry part of this, bigger window that we're talking about today?
It can be. Masonry is a funny thing that way because Masonry itself does not actually include anything occult, but because it has initiation rituals and because it has a lot of very rich symbolism, men who were interested in the occult very often back in the day became Freemasons. And so you tend to have, most Masons, they literally would not know what end of a magical dagger to grab. They have no knowledge of the subject, and that's fine. That's not what Masonry is about. But you always have where there's a large Masonic scene. You have a lot of guys who are simply there to do charitable work. They're there, for the social benefits. They're there to become better people. And then you have a sort of circle over to one side of guys who are Freemasons and who share the charitable interests and who share these other things, but are also into the occult. And they very quickly figure out we figure out who each other are, and start talking quietly. And it's done. That's been the case since colonial times too.
Because it's just the cool people.
Well, but it's also. It also has. It's got since a lot of occult traditions have initiation rituals, and the Masons are really good at doing them. If you join the Masons, you work through the rituals, you learn how to do an initiation ceremony. You're going to know that inside and out, and that's something you need to know. Also, there's all that rich symbolism, so you get used to thinking in symbols. Also, if you're a Brother Mason, you promise to keep the secrets of your Brother Masons. So, if Brother Joe here is a practicing Kabbalist, and he would probably lose his job if that came out because his employer is a Southern Baptist or something. He knows he can trust you because you're a Brother Mason, because you're not going to betray his secret. And so the two of you can sit down and talk Kabbalah, until the cows come home, and you're safe because you've got that bond of brotherhood there. So that was a very important part of it.
Why has the idea of the occult, I mean, there's that word that freaks people out. But, I mean, just that word. But any kind of, any of it, tarot cards, runes, I Ching, astrology, numerology,
Zorvoyance.
That one. See, no English, no speaking English.
Well, I'm not sure what language Zorvoyance is in.
I don't
Randolph
know.
kind of had his own language.
But anyway,
but yeah, people get incredibly freaked out about this stuff. And here's the sad thing: they didn't used to. It really is a recent thing. In the 1920s, everybody was doing this stuff. In the 1880s, everybody was doing this stuff. Really, I think it's been since the 60s. And why it should be that because there had been countercultures before the 1960s. There had been, free love movements, all this kind of stuff. There was nothing new about the 60s, not even drugs. And yet, for some reason, the 60s, the aftermath of the 60s, hit this bizarre sort of panic button in the American psyche. And people just wigged out, and a lot of people, oh my God, tarot cards, if I touch them, the devil will jump out and eat me, or what have you. And it's really bizarre. And you wonder what happened to the very adventurous, very, very courageous, very, well, let's check things out spirit that this country used to have that's made us all so fearful. And so, so worried that if we stray from the straight and, from the narrow primarily, so rather straight than straight, if we stray off this path of mental narrowness, something's going to get us. I really don't know what happened, but it's really, frankly, rather sad.
Well, I'm going to throw something out there.
By all means.
I mean, are there or are you aware of any conspiracy theories that, talks about, well, we're going to make all of that bad because people are becoming too free and too interested in their own thing. So now we're going to use that against them, as a control mechanism?
I suppose it's possible. My basic rule has been never blame conspiracy for what can be accounted for by stupidity. And normally working with the U.S. government, for example, that's a good rule. But, I mean, the thing is, there are always people who are saying, oh, you shouldn't do that because if you do that, you won't do whatever I tell you. But why people fell for it this time? That's the question that interests me. Why people got sucked into it. I don't happen to know the answer.
Yeah, it's crazy. But people are so... Because, now I live in East Texas. People are so afraid of it.
Yeah.
And I don't really understand it because we all have our own traditions. We all realize that we're intuitive. We all utilize the same tool or the same psyche. I want to say methodology.
Yeah. We've all got all of these capacities in us, and most of us use them at least a little bit. And yet, for some reason, so many people these days in this country are so scared. And I think to some extent it's a matter of just a sort of general pervasive fear. There's a lot of fear these days. A lot of people getting caught up in that sort of blank terror of everything that drives so many of the problems in our society today. And maybe we need to look at just the deeper roots of why Americans are so scared.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, you are, an archdruid. You have been involved in this area of study for years. What is it about the occult that draws you in? What is it for you?
It has varied at different times in my life. Originally, I grew up in basically a non-religious family, not even so much atheist as apathetic when it came to spirituality. But I had a lot of questions and a lot of interest in spirituality. None of the established religions really appealed to me. I heard what they had to say and said, that doesn't make any sense to me. And the point of occultism that drew me, and still does to a real extent, is that it's not about believing what somebody says. It's about experiencing things. It's about the Missouri approach. Show me, and that's always a powerful thing to say. You don't have to just believe what the guy in the dog collar tells you. You can find out. You can experience these things for yourself. There's also the autonomy, because a lot of the practices that unfold from occultism have to do with doing stuff. You can do things like divination. You read the tarot. You read the I Ching. You read astrology. You can figure out what's going to happen. You get advance warning. You get a reading that says stay home today, and you stay home, and so you miss the big 56 car pileup on what's it. You get you look at your astrological transits for the day, where the moon is in the day, and says, okay, sometime around 4:00 this afternoon, there's going to be a period where something that doesn't look very promising is going to show up, but it's actually there's going to be real advantages there. You catch it, you go for it, and you end up succeeding in some really improbable way. That happens to people in occultism all the time, and so. And the various other disciplines, the ways of focusing your attention and changing your consciousness so you get out of your own way and accomplish things in life. It really is practical. And so that's something that draws me a lot. It draws a lot of other people. It's not just, sit around and wait for something to happen. You try to figure out what's happening using divination. You try to act on it using some of the other practices we've got, and things go better for you. Your life works. You're not just left kind of sitting there wondering if someone or something is going to make life better for you. You make your life better. And and there's also I suppose there's an extent to which it's simply it's entertaining. We all, or I don't know we all, but lots of people, they go to see Harry Potter flicks. They read books. They read books about magic. They read fantasy novels. Everybody wants, has this longing to participate in this kind of stuff. It's become a multi-billion-dollar industry. But most people just sit there on their couches and watch, watch TV shows and videos of other people doing these things. You can do them yourself. Why not? Here, have a wand. Come on, let's practice clairvoyance.
Well, and to me, it's really about the journey and the learning and, that part, not just, it's not hard. It's about the exploration. I guess that's the part that's fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so much, it's not just a matter of cut and dried formulas. It's here's this open-ended process. Where will it take you? You can't be sure at first. Why don't we find out? So yeah, there's a very exploratory aspect. It's not. It's more about going new places and doing new things, rather than just sort of sitting there and waiting for something to happen.
Well, and if they get your book, the new Encyclopedia of the Occult, they'll have all kinds of things that they can explore and try that they've never heard of before that can help them along their journey.
Mm-hmm. And there are many other good books on magic, but I would recommend, if you're doing any kind of occult training, having a good encyclopedia of this kind to hand is going to be useful. So you're going, okay, so what on earth, as I say, what on earth is an alembic? Because occult writers drop that kind of thing all the time. Especially when you've been doing this for a while, you tend to forget that everybody doesn't know what an alembic is. You've got 3 of them in the basement lab. You're used to it, but yeah. Having that kind of knowledge is useful. And as I said, one of my main reasons for writing it was that was a book I wanted to have on the shelf when I was beginning.
So we've been talking about the occult and your personal experience, but I think a lot of what many people hear is really about the bad side. I mean, is there a bad side? Are there really people who use these tools and methods and methodologies for their own personal gain?
Mm-hmm. As with anything in the human world, as with anything human, if it's out there, people are going to misuse it, no matter what. Name a thing, you can find somebody who's being stupid and somebody else who's being nasty using that thing. One of the things that a lot of people forget is that if they run away from the whole subject because some people are misusing it.
Big news! The new Sprint LTE Plus network is faster than Verizon and AT&T based on analysis of a recent study by Nielsen. And to celebrate, we're inviting you to join Sprint for the biggest offer in U.S. wireless history. Switch to Sprint and save 50% on most Verizon, AT&T, or T-Mobile rates. Yep, you heard that right. No gimmicks, no tricks. You have Verizon 6 gig for $60, 30 with Sprint. And if you have 15 gigs for $100 from AT&T, 50 with Sprint. Even if you have T-Mobile's 10 gig for $80, we'll give it to you for $40. And we won't force you to watch video in low def. Oh, and one more thing. We'll even pay your switching fees up to $650 per line so you can switch to the Sprint LTE Plus network today. Visit a Sprint store or sprint.com/save 50%.
Offer coverage not available everywhere for discounted phones. Excludes taxes, surcharges, roaming, and premium content. Subject to new line $36 activation fee. Credit valid 4 day. Plans may not be exact match. See website for eligible plans. Offer ends 1/7/16. Savings through 1/8/18. Exclusions and restrictions apply. Contract valid via reward card requires online registration.
They're completely at the mercy of the people who are misusing it because they have no idea what to look out for. They have no idea how to protect themselves, and there are very simple ways of protecting yourself. They don't know what to do, so they're completely at the mercy of the creeps, the occasional creeps who get into this stuff for the wrong motives. And in fact, one of the things that most, and as far as I know, pretty much every reputable magical tradition will teach you is how to protect yourself, how to keep your own energies clean and clear, how to prevent people from misusing this stuff to your disadvantage. And it's actually not that difficult. And it doesn't involve any, evil spirits or anything like quite the contrary. So, are there potential hazards to legal? Yes. There are a lot of con artists out there. There are a lot of people who want to take your money and, and give you nothing in return. There are some serious creepzoids out there who will hurt you. You can also get really caught up in what I tend to call astral melodrama. You perceive something, oh my God, there must be there's a legion of evil spirits surrounding this house. And you sort of run around, sprinkling salt and getting all, it wasn't an evil spirit. Or maybe, it was just the mood. It's complicated, but, things shift a little bit. Especially in the early stages, people tend to go overboard, and they can get into these grandiose, melodramatic stories that they tell to themselves that basically serve to keep them from getting bored, I think. And is it helpful? No, it is not. But that's one of the things that can go wrong. If you are mentally ill, if you're receiving a doctor's care due to any kind of significant mental illness, you probably need to stay away from this stuff. Some basic level of mental stability is a requirement, or you can make life very difficult for yourself. But for most people, it's not something that's going to give them any trouble.
And is it like a Harry Potter thing, where you learn to do this stuff? I mean, you were talking about, using it to navigate your life, but I mean,
Harry Potter.
You learn to do stuff so you can levitate things and walk through walls? Come on, the good stuff.
Harry Potter is to real magic like young Frankenstein is to real science. Okay, it has absolutely nothing in common. I would love to be able to levitate things, make a broom fly through the air and all this kind of goofy stuff. Let me lay something on you here. Magic is not supernatural. I've never seen anybody else do a magical working that resulted in the breaking of the laws of nature. Rocks falling straight up into the sky or anything like that. The thing that makes magic different from any other way of activity is that we don't understand, nobody understands really, how the magical action causes things to happen. But when they start happening, they happen in a natural way. For example, you take like a traditional rain dance that a lot of cultures use as a kind of social magic when they're having a drought. You do a rain dance. Okay, there's a rain dance. Everyone's dancing and chanting, and if you're a meteorologist, you'll notice, okay, the barometric pressure is dropping, the wind has changed, clouds roll, and it starts to rain. It all looks perfectly normal. It looks like a coincidence. And in fact, one way to talk about magic is that it's a way of arranging coincidences that you want. But it doesn't do anything. You're not shooting lightning bolts off your fingertips. If you want to do that, go get a Van de Graaff generator or something. Take up, try to work with some of Nikola Tesla's inventions. Magic makes things happen, but it makes things happen in natural ways.
And it sounds like, to me, working with the energy of the earth, is about working with our intention, and being connected and being in the flow of nature, life, in the groove. That's the word I like to use.
And it's about figuring out, noticing that what we're doing consciously and what we're doing non-consciously can be two very different things and very often contradict each other. And this is actually a very important part of magic. One of the reasons you use symbols in magic is because the unconscious parts of the mind don't speak words. They speak in the language of dream, which is the language of symbolism. And so if you want to talk to your unconscious, you can't do it with words. You put a symbol in your mind, you concentrate on the symbol, the unconscious goes, oh, I know what that means. Okay. And so a lot of it,
interesting.
So much of what's going on in magic is a matter of talking to our own unconscious minds, so that so that conscious and unconscious get on the same page and aim in the same direction. And so you're not constantly going at cross purposes. We've all seen this kind of thing where, for example, everybody I know knows somebody who's been in one failed relationship after another, and they all fail the same way. And the person seems to seek out, the partner that beats them. And they go through like 5 or 6 relationships, and they do that every single time. What's happening there is that the unconscious mind has locked onto some set of things as this is who I'm going to fall in love with, that indicate that it's someone who does spousal abuse. And if you can get the unconscious to go, oh, that's not a good idea, I don't like being beaten. Or if you figure out why your unconscious mind thinks you ought to be beaten and keeps on dragging you into relationships where you're going to get beaten, then you can clear that up and actually fall in love with someone who will treat you right.
But see, that's good. That's smart.
Yes.
That's healthy.
That's magic. That's magic.
It must be magical.
Well, there we go. Because everybody is magical. Everybody does magic all the time. It's just that most people don't know that they're doing magic, and so they don't do it competently. And they do it at cross purposes to what they actually want in life. You can watch somebody cast a failure spell on themselves, constantly going, oh, this is not going to work.
Oh, I'm really good
at that. Oh, this is so difficult. Yeah, exactly. And what they're doing is putting a whammy on themselves, because they're just reinforcing the same self-defeating things over and over again. Even if you don't believe it, okay, and especially if you don't believe it, if you stop yourself from saying that and instead say, just anytime you see that comment, say, I'm going to win this. Whether you believe it or not, it does not matter whether you believe it or not. Just say that every time. I'm going to win this. I am the master. I am in control of this situation. It's very interesting how soon that sort of sinks in, and the mind gets used to moving in that track, and then all of a sudden you can win this. All of a sudden you are in control of the situation because you're no longer fighting with yourself.
But it's so fun.
Exactly. What, to fight with yourself?
Well, if I wasn't fighting with myself, then who would I be fighting with?
Well, now, of course, there's another thing. People have their comfort zones, and some of their comfort zones are in the weirdest places. I'm sure we all know people. Their comfort zone is being miserable. They will make a beeline to everything that will make them miserable because that's where they're used to being. And that's kind of they gravitate toward misery over and over again. You can't get them not to because that's what they're used to. And so they'll seek it out. And if you can catch yourself doing that and say, okay, why am I doing this? First of all, you can look at your past. You can poke around your memories. You can see, okay, why did I get into this habit? And that's one way to help get out of it. But you can also just catch yourself doing it and say, no, I'm going to do something else now. I'm going to do something that doesn't make me miserable. And it's going to be horribly uncomfortable at first because you're not in your comfort zone. You're being happy. That's unfamiliar. You don't know what it's like. It makes your skin crawl because it's so unfamiliar, and then you gradually get used to it. That's magic.
Cool. But it sounds so easy. Why do I have to read all those books?
Well, no, it's simple. It's not easy. Simple and easy are not the same thing. The thing with the books is that there's a lot of knack to it. There's a lot of methods that have been come up with over the last 5,000 years or so for making it go a little more smoothly, getting that conversation with your unconscious self through symbols to work well, how to rework your thoughts, how to rework your feelings, how to rework your energy, your life energy, so that you get what you want out of life, not what you don't want out of life. And so, so you should run out and buy all my books and learn how.
That's right. Especially,
I think it's a great idea.
New Encyclopedia of the Occult.
Well, that's definitely a place to start.
And I'm looking at the clock. We have 5 minutes till we have to go to break. Mm-hmm. And you had mentioned something in your research was that one of the things you were kind of able to do was to trace back the history, or see the connections between the different people in the occult tradition and take it back. So how far back were you able to take it back with being able to actually hang on to that thread moving back in time?
Ancient Egypt.
Seriously.
Basically, the magic that we have now, things like the magic of the Golden Dawn and so on, comes to us from the Renaissance. The Renaissance got their magic largely from the Arab world and also from magical traditions that had gotten into Europe dating back from Roman times. Those came from a sort of general Mediterranean magical. Back during the Roman Empire, you had lots of people practicing lots of magic, and they all sort of swapped notes. And then, but a lot of that originally comes from Egypt, and you can trace it back step by step each part of the way.
That's cool.
So, there are magical practices being done now where you can go step, bip, 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 and trace who had it all the way back, to the temples of Egypt.
Well, you hear people say that, and it's like, you're just, making it up. But you're being really serious, so it's like,
I'm really serious. Now, this doesn't mean that it was passed down in any organized fashion, because so often magic has been a matter of, you find stuff gets written down, books get passed from person to person. Tradition, it has to be in many parts of history. It's had to be very deep underground, and so it's not like there's this specific mystical temple lineage being passed on like something in a bad kung fu movie. It's simply that certain practices, certain teachings, certain traditions, you can track them back. Okay, this is these guys had them, and these people over here had them, and they passed them on to so and so, and they got them from here, and it really does actually. I mean, there are other sources, but the oldest of the sources I've been able to trace is ancient Egypt.
Do you think that was and I'm going to say root culture for the bulk of the arcane esoteric knowledge that we have? Or do you think that there was like a root thing, at some point in time?
No, I think the thing is the Egyptian magic is the oldest that we know about. And it so happened that it was really influential in the Roman world, and thus in the Western world thereafter. If you go to other parts of the world, you'll find that their magic has different roots. And even in the Western world, we've got stuff from Egypt, we've got stuff from Greece, we've got stuff from all over the place. And in every generation, you also have practicing occultists who are just saying, well, what happens if I do this? I'm going to try this. I don't think anyone's ever done that one before. And so you end up with a lot of innovation going on constantly, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But so there is no one root. It's like, what is the root of cooking?
We were hungry.
There are actually kinds of cooking that we know go back to Egypt. Sourdough bread. The ancient Egyptians made sourdough bread, and
they weren't even in San Francisco.
They.
Anyway, there's the music, which means we need to go to break.
Okay, we'll go to break.
We're here talking to John Michael Greer about his new book, The Encyclopedia of the Occult, and we're going to be back with John to talk about his other new book, The Golden Dawn, after these words from our sponsors.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.